Welcome back to another edition of the Buy Low Fantasy Sports Show with Mitch and Bam. I'm Mitch, he's Bam. Bam, say hello.
Hey.
Coming to you today from 1490 Newstalk 1077. Happy to be here. I want to thank you for listening. Hopefully everybody had a great week 6, and now we're moving on to week 7. Got 4 teams on bye this week: the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Browns, and the Steelers. So make sure to get those guys out of your lineup. Don't be that guy.
Nobody likes that guy.
Bam, with all that being said, you ready to walk this slate?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start her off with the Dolphins at the Bills. This game has a 41.5 point total, and the Bills are favored by 17. All right, so starting off on this game, the Dolphins came really close to winning the Turd Bowl last week against the Redskins.
Turd Bowl.
They at least had the opportunity to take the game to overtime, but instead they decided to go for Tua instead of just kicking the extra point. Smooth move there, X-Lax.
Yeah, the Dolphins got flushed in the Turd Bowl.
I like it. So not that it matters a whole lot, but Ryan Fitzmagic will be starting this game over Josh Rosen. Having said that, I have zero interest in the Dolphins skill players. But if you're super desperate, maybe you're one of those guys that has a whole bunch of Panthers or a whole bunch of Buccaneers on your roster. Preston Williams is a guy that's getting a lot of volume in this offense.
You got to be pretty desperate, though.
Yeah. So what do you got on the Bills, Pam?
So one note is that every Bills game this year, every single one, has hit the under on the Vegas total. So 41.5 in this game. Looks like it's going to hit the under, definitely. So if you want to play Josh Allen, John Brown, Frank Gore, Devin Singletary, those guys, just know there are some very real volume concerns when teams play the Dolphins because not a lot of plays are going to get run for the starters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to limit the ceiling of the Bills' offense as a whole. And this Bills' defense is legit. They're very good. They're very aggressive. So that's the no-duh play of the week is the Bills defense. So if you're in a league that has those guys on waivers, pick them up immediately. Don't be that guy.
For sure. I actually just kept those guys rostered after week 4 just because I knew they had this matchup coming up.
Oh, yeah.
So, nice. Let's move it on to the Texans at the Colts. This game has a 47-point total, and the Colts are favored by 1 at home. So what you got on the Texans at the Colts, Bam?
So we got a few injuries to discuss here. Just like last week, there'll be a lot of injuries this week, so buckle up, folks. So the Texans are missing 2 offensive linemen, center Greg Manson, right tackle Titus Howard. And the entirety of the Texans secondary was limited all week in practice. So it looks like they're kind of beat up in the secondary. Sure. On the Colts side, you got wide receiver Paris Campbell is out, free safety Malik Hooker, cornerback Kenny Moore, cornerback Pierre Desir didn't practice all week. So these are 2 teams that are very, very banged up in the secondary, in a fast track, in the dome. So one of the first guys I'm looking at is quarterback Deshaun Watson. He's been on fire last few weeks, getting good production with his arm and his legs.
Nice.
So fire him up again against this injury-depleted Colts defense.
Nice. Kicking it back to NBA Jam, right? He's on fire.
Yeah, he's on fire. And then after a spike week in week 5, Will Fuller predictably dropped a dud in week 6. It's just how these guys work. Yep. But he dropped 3 touchdown passes against the Chiefs. So this ain't a bad spot to go back to the well on the fast track in a dome. Pretty high point total.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a good spot for him.
Absolutely.
And then the Colts give it up to some tight ends pretty consistently, but who do you play? Do you play Fells? Do you play Akins? Fells has been getting more snaps and targets, but both are dart throws. So who knows?
Yeah. I like both of these guys for a tournament in DFS. But in season long or any kind of cash games.
Yeah, if you're desperate for a tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking this game is going to shoot out a bit, though. You talked about all those injuries in the secondary. So our guy, Jacoby Brissett, is definitely a play here. I think probably a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week.
Ooh, the brisket's going to be tender. I like it.
Right.
Got a nice smoke ring on him. Going to slice him up. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Jacoby Briskett's targets there? Some of those wide receivers, tight ends. What do you got on the Colts offense overall?
So I like T.Y. Hilton this week. He owns the Texans historically. You thought there was some old guy owning the Texans. No, T.Y. Hilton, in fact, owns the Texans. But some trash talking has taken place, and the Texans players have said this week they're going to focus on shutting down T.Y. Hilton after he's burnt them so many times. So this should open up some opportunities for some other players, like some ancillary pieces like Chester Rogers and Zach Pascal at wide receiver. So if you're desperate for wide receiver, maybe grab one of these guys.
Yep.
But also, and most importantly, the Colts tight ends very much in play here if they pay extra attention to T.Y. Hilton. Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, both those guys are in play. I think Eric Ebron is a great tournament play in DFS and a great guy to hopefully pick up and get some points this week. And I don't like either defense. How about you?
No, not with all those secondary injuries, all of those guys being limited all week. Yeah, I think I'm avoiding the defenses here.
Yeah, and it's going to turn out to be a 17-10 game.
Right. All right, moving on. Next game on the slate is the Cardinals at the Giants. This game has a 50.5 point total, and the Giants are favored by 3. What you got on these two?
So believe it or not, we've got some more injuries to talk about. You got on the Giants side, you got wide receiver Sterling Shepard is out. And then on the Cardinals side, defensive end Zach Allen is out, and he's one of their big run stuffers. And then you got David Johnson and Christian Kirk are both game time decisions with ankle injuries. I don't know what's going on over there. They're tripping over stuff, maybe some potholes in Arizona. So make sure you're checking those injury reports this morning to see who to play.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at the Cardinals' recent offensive success, and it's come versus bad defenses, yes, but it's also important to note they've used far more 11 and 12 personnel rather than those 4 wide receiver sets these last 2 weeks when they've had those offensive spikes.
Yeah.
So if Kirk plays and they end up going back to more 4 wide receiver sets, the production's probably going to dip as well. And I think this will also affect DJ, as most of his work in the passing game has come out of the slot. Yeah. And has carried his fantasy scores the entire season.
Yeah. Speaking of DJ, he's been battling various injuries over the past couple weeks. He had the back injury last week, ended up playing through that. Now he's got an ankle injury. So as a result, running back Chase Edmonds, he's got a little bit of additional run. And so if DJ's out this week with that ankle injury, I think he's a must play.
Oh, you're going to chase the points with Chase?
That's right.
I like it. And then you got cornerback Patrick Peterson's returning from suspension. The Cardinals are switching up some personnel in their secondary. So I think Pat Pete is going to follow Darius Slayton around. Yeah. And Tremaine Brock, who was playing Patrick Peterson's role, is going to move into the slot. So while getting Patrick Peterson's great for this defense, we could see some communication mix-ups and busted coverages as a result of this transition on an already bad pass defense. So it's good that he's back, but could spell some problems communication-wise.
Right.
And then tight end Evan Ingram is in a smash spot versus the Cardinals, who still can't figure out how to cover a tight end. We've talked about this at length.
Yeah.
They just don't care for whatever reason. I guess when you play the Cardinals, the tight end puts on an invisible cloak. I don't know. Something like that.
To everybody wearing red, yes.
Right. And then Golden Tate's also in play. He's a huge yak guy. So what do you think about Saquon Barkley?
Yeah. So a lot of my concern around Barkley is, does he assume that heavy usage role that he had prior to the injury? If he does, he has a great chance to go off here, unless you predict Wayne Gallman to eat into that a little bit. And then, of course, that'll reduce we'll end up reducing our exposure to him in DFS as a result of that, because I do worry about him coming back from that injury. Do they try to get Gallman a little more involved to kind of spell him more? So that's my main concern with Barkley. Is what
definitely a concern.
Like. And then I think both quarterbacks are in play here. I think this turns into a shootout. I mean, it does have one of the highest totals on the slate. So I think this game is very stackable, especially in DFS, because of that shootout situation, the quarterbacks, the passing game pieces.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving along. The next game we have on our slate is the Raiders at the Packers. Raiders at the Packers.
The Packers?
Yeah, the Packers. The Fakers. So this game has a 47-point total. The Packers are favored by 4.5. Probably some more injury news, huh, Bam?
Believe it or not, yes. Injury news. So on the Raiders side, you got defensive end Arden Key. He was a first-round pick for them. He's out. Tyrell Williams is out at wide receiver. Yep. And right tackle Trent Brown is doubtful. All those are pretty big impacts on this game.
Yeah.
On the Packers side, strong safety Darnell Savage is missing his second straight game. And wide receiver Devontae Adams is missing his third straight game. And then he also got Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Geronimo Allison at wide receiver, both game-time decisions. So make sure you're checking those injuries this morning leading up to locks for lineup. So
yes.
So with all these Packers wide receivers injuries, somebody's got to catch some passes. So last Monday night, you saw wide receiver Allen Lazard is someone that A-Raj likes, and he's lobbied for some playing time for him versus the Lions. Did pretty well.
Yeah.
So if all those guys miss for the Packers, he's minimum price in DFS. He's a decent flex play and season long against this Raiders pass funnel defense. The pass funnel, of course, is a team that's good against the run, bad against the pass.
Yeah.
What do you think about these Packers running backs?
My goodness. So Aaron Jones, we saw him go off a couple weeks ago against the Cowboys. He had 4 touchdowns and just racking up yardage when Jamal Williams missed. Jamal Williams came back on Monday Night Football, and you saw they had a nice little 50-50 split going on. So you can play both here, I think, against the Raiders, but the ceiling is going to be limited because of that split.
Yeah.
What do you think about the passing game overall with all these wide receivers being out? Are you chasing after Aaron Rodgers?
Well, I don't like it, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, he's had a down year overall, only 2 games where he's posted a decent fantasy score. I think the points will come for him at some point. I don't know if this is the spot, but like I said, play Lazard if those 3 guys are out. It'd be even better for Aaron Rodgers if all 3 of them played, but don't think that's going to happen. And then on the Raiders side, tight end Darren Waller signed a nice contract extension. Should see some extra targets since Tyrell Williams is out, as the Packers have done one of those weird reversal of their funnels of the past few weeks. The first 4 weeks, they were really bad against the run, good against the pass. Yep. And then they got tired of that, so now they're good against the run and bad against the pass.
Yeah, they just completely flip-flop, yeah.
Yeah, some teams do that on occasion when they're tired of getting beat up on one side of the ball. Hopefully they'll figure it out just to be a mediocre defense between the two.
Right.
That'd be ideal.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Yeah, I was probably getting ready to ask about this guy. What do you think about Josh Jacobs, the running back for the Raiders?
Oh, Joe Jack.
Yeah.
He's a guy that needs his team to have a lead to get any significant run, to get some good volume. I don't think this is the spot. The Raiders are missing just as many pieces as the Packers. Packers are at home. I'll take the Packers all day. Yeah. And then never play Derek Carr ever for any reason. Never.
For sure. All right, cool. Anything else on this game?
Moving on. Next game we have on the slate is the Rams at the Falcons. This game has the highest point total on the slate at 55, and the Rams are favored by 3 on the road at the Falcons. 3-point road favorite.
Yeah, what you got on this one?
Well, I don't know if you're going to believe me, but there's some more injuries here.
I don't believe it.
Oh, yeah, so many injuries.
Yes.
So on the Falcons side, cornerback Desmond Trufant is out. That helps this Rams passing game a bit. On the Rams side, Malcolm Brown is looking doubtful. And defensive end Clay Matthews and cornerback Aqib Talib are both on injured reserve. They'll be back later in the year.
Yeah.
The big news here is all the trades, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So starting off on this long walkthrough, we got quarterback Jared Goff, and this Rams offense has looked awful of late.
Yep.
Especially the offensive line, who lost their left guard, Note Bloom, to injured reserve. So while the Rams O-line allows the second most pressure in the league, the Dolphins allowing the most, the Falcons defense gets the second fewest pressures, the Dolphins getting the fewest. So this is a weakness versus weakness matchup. And I like how consistently bad the Dolphins are. in all phases.
Like, yeah, every stat you could say this team gets the second most.
Yeah,
because the Dolphins get the first.
exactly. As long as it's a bad stat.
Yeah.
So in this weakness versus weakness matchup, and the Falcons secondary blowing coverages nonstop, and they're missing some players, I think Goff and his wide receivers are playable here.
Yeah.
I like Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods in that order. And we've seen a speed guy like Fuller just absolutely murder the Falcons, and Cooks has a similar role in this offense.
Yeah.
Kupp's obviously playable because that's Goff's BFF.
Right.
And if you hold a gun to my head, which would be rude if you did that, if I have to play a Rams tight end, it's going to be Everett. He's getting more targets lately.
Yeah, for sure. He's getting a lot of run lately.
So what do you make about this Rams running back situation?
It's just a straight up hot mess. So a guy we talked about in the past, he's been touted all offseason by many of the fantasy experts, Darrell Henderson. He finally got his first significant work of the season last week. And he looked truly impressive. Looks like probably the most talented back on this roster. But he did that because Gurley was injured. Now Gurley's back from that injury. Malcolm Brown, who is the true backup, is likely out. So you got Henderson that may take over this backfield at some point. Gurley, who still owns the backfield. I think it's a precarious situation at best.
Precarious, nice.
Obviously, you're going to play Gurley if you have him in season long, obviously. But I'm avoiding this backfield altogether in DFS.
I think you can take a stab at Gurley after what we've seen the Falcons give up to running backs recently.
Yeah,
I'll take a stab at him.
I don't think so here. I'm not doing it.
Let's do it. Come on.
What you got on Atlantis?
We've been playing Gurley in tournament lineups for like a month now. We can't stop now. We got to keep going, you know.
Well, I don't want to throw my money away anymore.
All right, it's fine. Fine, be that way.
What you got on the Falcons offense?
Oh boy! So big news this week was the Rams made some trades. They traded away Marcus Peters to the Ravens. We'll talk about that trade when we get to that game.
Yeah.
But most importantly, they traded away 2 first-round picks for cornerback Jalen Ramsey.
Yes.
He's expected to play here, and we can expect him, reasonably expect him, we don't know for sure, but reasonably expect him to shadow wide receiver Julio Jones.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the ball, Calvin Ridley will be playing against a backup because, as we talked about, Peters has been traded and Aqib Talib's on injured reserve.
Yeah.
So I think both these guys are in play because you just don't know the situation. Priority, I would say Ridley is more of a priority over Julio if I had to pick between the two.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen Jalen get beat a couple times by star wide receivers, and Julio is obviously a star guy. And then Calvin Ridley, I mean, he's got the upside, especially against a backup corner. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then defensive tackle Aaron Donald should be in Matt Ryan's face a good portion of the game. Not a full portion or a small portion. A good right-sized portion. Because this Falcons O-line is weakest at the guard spots. They got 2 scrubs there. And the thing to note here is when Matt Ryan is under pressure, he filters targets to wide receiver Mohamed Sanu and tight end Austin Hooper.
Yeah.
So Hooper has a nice floor here with a shot at the ceiling if he can get those red zone targets. Yes, he did good last week. I think he has a chance to do good again this week.
For sure.
What do you think about Devonta Freeman? Any love there?
You know, he had a great game last week, but you can still see his upside being limited by your boy, Judge Ito Smith. He's getting all of that green zone.
No, Jay.
But yeah, so Ito Smith is getting all of that green zone work. That's the area, you know, inside the 5-yard line. So he's getting all the goal line touches. So I think that limits Freeman's upside here, his ceiling, if you will. Still got a nice safe floor against this Rams defense. This is a very beatable Rams defense. So
especially with so much flux on the personnel side, they got to have some holes there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about the quarterbacks?
The quarterbacks, talked about Goff a bit.
Yeah.
I think he's obviously in play and what's most likely to be a shootout. Matt Ryan's also a guy who's put up 300 yards passing in every game this year.
Yeah.
So hopefully you have him in your season-long leagues. And I think he's a good cash game play in DFS. And I think it really comes down to is that these are two teams that are struggling, but they have some talent. So it's who can exploit their matchups is what I'm looking for here.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Anything else you want to talk on this game?
Let's keep her moving.
All righty. Let's talk next on the Vikings at the Lions. This game has a 43.5 point total, and the Vikes are favored by 1.5.
Some road favorites, huh?
That's right. What you got on the Vikings at the Lions?
So I think this game is pretty simple. I think Dalvin Cook's in a smash spot. He's getting about 8 high-value touches per game, high-value touches, those green zone carries and targets that we're talking about, and any targets on the field, because those are more valuable for fantasy than just your standard carries. And the Lions have been getting gashed by running backs as of late, especially now that defensive tackle Mike Daniels is expected to miss his 4th straight game.
Yeah.
So Dalvin Cook, you're obviously going to play him, but when you go to set your lineup, hit that button extra hard because that's how good a spot he's in. Yeah.
That's right.
What do you like about the Vikings passing game?
So all of these guys, it is very concentrated. First of all, it's Kirk Cousins throwing to Thielen and Diggs. That's it. There's nobody else has got a significant target share outside of those guys.
Yeah.
But they have the same volume concerns that they do every week. If the Vikings coaching staff has their way, they're going to run the ball 50 times a game, and their quarterback's never going to throw it. But we have seen these guys be on fire lately a little bit, and namely Stephon Diggs. We saw him blow up last week, and him and Cousins, they've got a good relationship going. You know, almost like they're cousins from Alabama. You know what I mean? So, so there's definitely some concerns here about their volume, but they have been playing so well together over the past couple of weeks.
I like it. And then if you're looking at the Lions skill players, the Vikings give it up to wide receiver and tight end, but they stymie the run. They've allowed 10 passing touchdowns, but only 1 rushing touchdown this year. So Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, T.J. Hawkinson are all in play here. And Marvin Jones is a guy who's popping in a lot of those buy low models.
Yep.
So if I like all 3 pass catchers, I also like Lions quarterback Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting little fun fact. Matt Stafford has the highest passer rating versus the blitz, while the Vikings defense allows the lowest passer rating when they're blitzing.
Yeah.
So something's got to give in this strength versus strength matchup, and so I'll take my chances on Staff here.
For sure.
And then I think both defenses are playable because of this low total, but don't get your hopes up.
Sweet. All right, let's hear the news from 1490 Newstalk. When we come back, we'll continue our Slatewalk. Take her away.
Woo.
Welcome back to the Buy Low Fantasy Sports Show with Mitch and Bam on 1490 News Talk 1077. Let's continue our Slatewalk now as we move on to the Jaguars at the Bengals.
The Jaguars.
The Jaguars with a 53.5 point total.
43.5.
Jags, what'd I say?
53.
43.5. My bad. And the Jags are favored by 4.
Nice.
What you got on this one, Bam?
Well, we got some more injuries. I know it's hard to believe. So bang these out real quick. You got A.J. Green, who's missed the whole year. He's also out this week, but he did practice, so he might get back in the lineup next week.
Sweet.
And then the Bungles are also missing 3 starting offensive linemen, 2 pass rushers, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Nice.
And then on the Jag side, all their tight ends are dead, except for this guy, Josh Oliver, who might finally make his season debut this week after having hamstring injuries.
Nice.
So the Jags defensive line versus the Bengals offensive line is a huge mismatch, huge. And this should filter more targets to wide receiver Tyler Boyd, with this Bengals O-line being bad and them being so pass-happy. Volume is never a concern, but effectiveness is. So Tyler Boyd's playable, but temporary expectations.
Right.
Having said that, I have zero interest in the Red Rocket, Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And then the Bengals are missing 2 starting cornerbacks, which sets up nice for wide receiver DJ Baby Chark. But the Bengals have done a good job all year of shading coverage to the opposing team's wide receiver 1. And they have not allowed a 100-yard game to a wide receiver all year, surprisingly.
Nice.
So Chark is more of a bet on talent and volume over matchup play. And you also got wide receiver D.D. Westbrook has a safe floor, specifically in PPR formats. But he'll need a long TD here, I think, to have a ceiling game. So,
yeah.
What do you got on our boy Leonard Fournette?
Yeah. So Leonard Fournette, as we so lovingly refer to as Fat CMC.
Fat CMC.
He's got that heavy snap share and volume.
He's heavy, all right.
But the Bengals DST, it stiffens up near the red zone. And, of course, the Jaguars have struggled in the red zone all year. Have kicked field goals on 76%, something ridiculous, of their red zone trips. So he probably has the safest floor of any running back this week. He just likely won't reach that ceiling game. He struggled. First of all, he struggled to score touchdowns all year. And then the Bengals don't really give up those red zone touchdowns. So he really has to break long touchdowns in order to hit that ceiling game, and I'm not sure it happens here.
Right, and the Bengals have been getting beat on the outside runs, not so much the runs up the middle. Yeah. So with all this tight ends in flux here for the Jaguars, you worry about their ability to set the edge and get those outside runs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's perfectly safe ceiling, but temporary expectations.
Yeah. But
Uh-oh.
on the Jaguars offense.
Here we go.
Quarterback Gardner Minshew.
He's
going to go out there and that's my boy. He's going to go out there and hoe you Garden up for you. He's the Jaguars have faced the toughest schedule of pass defenses so far in the NFL. They've had the roughest stretch there as far as their passing offense is concerned. Over the next 10 weeks, though, through the end of the season, they have the softest passing schedule defenses.
Nice.
Or passing defenses on their schedule. So I'm picking up Gardner Minshew everywhere he's available in season long. I'm probably playing him in DFS this week somewhere because the Bengals do have the number 30 pass defense. You worry about what happens when Nick Foles comes back. They're talking about him being possibly available in week 11. So you worry about that. But over the next, say you're the Patrick Mahomes owner, he's probably going to be out. The reports are right now 2 to 4 weeks. Guess what happens in 4 weeks? That's when you have to worry about the Nick Foles situation. So pick up Gardner Minshew, let him carry you over these next couple weeks, and then worry about that when it gets there.
Yeah, so what you're saying is keep the hose away from Gardner Minshew, right?
That's right. I'm joining the Minshew Mania hype train for sure. Anything else on this game?
Moving on.
All right. Next game is the 49ers at the Redskins, the second half of the Turd Bowl. This game has a 40.5 point total, not a 50.5, a 40.5 point total, and the Niners are favored by 9.5. What you got on this one?
Oh, man. So we got some more injuries here, believe it or not. And the 49ers are missing both starting tackles again this week and fullback. Kyle Juszczyk is also out, and in addition to wide receiver Deebo Samuel. So that's a little surprising late game scratch.
Yeah.
And the Redskins, they're just an awful team. So really their whole team should be on injury report.
For sure.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway about the 49ers right now is that this defense is legit. And you can't beat them passing or running. So I'm not sure what to do with it here.
Yeah, so Scary Terry McLaurin is the only Skins player I would consider. He's had the most fantasy points of rookie wide receivers through 5 games since Randy Moss back in old 1998.
Nice.
So I think we learned how that turned out, but probably not the spot for him to blow up here. But if you need to play him, play him.
For sure.
And then on the 49ers side, you got running back Tevin Coleman is getting the vast majority of the snaps and touches in the green zone and has a great chance to pop for a multi-touchdown game with the 49ers defense. Going to give them great field position all day.
For sure.
So I think Tevin Coleman and the 49ers defense is my favorite stack in DFS this week, especially in cash games.
For sure. And just to kind of caveat to your point about Coleman there, I want to point out that Matt Breida has had a couple monster runs this season. He's clocked in as the fastest speed ever on a touchdown run twice. He set the record in like week 1 or week 2 and then broke it in week 4. So it's insane to me. He's running really well. So, and with him and Coleman kind of splitting this backfield, I do like Breida a little bit as well. Probably Coleman more because of what you mentioned. He's getting all that goal line work. But we talked about the running backs now. What do you think about this passing game for the 49ers?
Well, other than George Kittle, I have no interest because there's not enough volume in what's probably going to be a blowout. This is a bad Skins defense and a really, really good 49ers defense. We saw what happened when the Patriots came to town. Should be the same story. So, no, thank you.
Yep, agreed. Anything else on this game?
Keep her moving.
All right. Up next, we have the Chargers at the Titans. This game has a slightly higher point total at 41, and the Titans are favored by 2.5. What you got on this one?
Oh, man. We got some more injuries. Again.
Yes.
So we got a very beat-up Chargers defense. They're missing several starters. And the Titans are relatively healthy, with the lone exception being their inside linebacker, Jayon Brown, being out. So, quarterback Ryan Tannehill takes over for the ineffective Marcus Mariota. Woat being the worst of all time. The opposite of the GOAT, in fact.
Right.
So we saw last week Ryan Tannehill targeted the wide receivers heavily against the Broncos. Could be because they were behind, but we also know from his time in Miami, he loves targeting the wide receiver.
Yeah.
So having said that, Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, and A.J. Brown all got 4 targets each. I think Corey Davis will be against cornerback Casey Hayward of the Chargers.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick, I'd play Adam Humphries in PPR, A.J. Brown in standard formats in DFS.
For sure.
And here's the big question for me this week as far as the Chargers. Russell Okung was activated off the PUP this week after battling an illness.
Yeah.
So good that he's healthy. Glad to have him back. So if he plays, I think this will solidify that shaky offensive line. And I think I like the Chargers passing game a little bit. So help me out here. Who do you like from the Chargers passing game if Okung plays?
Yeah, if he plays, Mike Williams, the wide receiver, he's been getting he's probably top 3 in the NFL as far as the highest number of air yards. But on the flip side, Keenan Allen, the other wide receiver, has the whole squeaky wheel narrative going on. He's been lobbying in the press to get the ball more, be more involved. So you're kind of picking and choosing between those two, I think. It's still a concentrated offense. You also have tight end Hunter Henry that returned last week and posted monster stats.
He went ham.
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways, and as you and I have talked about in the past, the Titans give it up to the tight end. So
yeah.
What do you make of this Chargers running back situation since Melvin Gordon's returned?
Well, to quote you about the Rams running back situation, this is a hot mess.
Nice.
So Gordon's getting all the rushing attempts, and Eckler's getting all the passing game work, which is kind of nice, but the lack of volume limits both of them, where, especially with this beat-up offensive line, neither of them are getting it going.
Right.
So I would avoid both of them this week if you can do it. And then if Russell Okung doesn't play, then I think Derrick Henry and the Titans defense become top plays in all formats, especially if Ryan Tannehill can come in there and just play NFL average quarterback.
Yeah.
That's all we want from him, just NFL average. We don't want good NFL average. I think that stabilizes this whole offense, puts Derrick Henry back in play after about a month of down games.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on. The next game we have on the slate is the Ravens at the Seahawks. This game has a 48.5 point total, and the Hawks are favored by 3. What you got on this one, Bam?
Oh, man, we got some more injuries. I'm sorry, folks. But the reason we harp on injuries, obviously, is to let you know who's playable based upon the matchup. So please bear with us.
Yes, for sure.
So on the Ravens side, we got a lot of game time decisions, namely Marquise Hollywood Brown and a cornucopia of defensive players.
Nice.
And then on the Sea Chicken side,
yes.
Will Dissly tore his Achilles. He's done for the year.
Right.
And they got a bunch of questionable offensive linemen. So make sure you check those injury reports this morning before you set your lineup. So
yeah, for sure.
And there's one thing you need to know about this game before even diagnosing the matchups and the volume and all that stuff is both of these teams play a ground and pound style of offense and only pass when they have to.
Yep.
But both of the defenses play the run well and give it up to the pass fairly consistently. However, both these offenses will stubbornly stick to the run even when they get down a score or two. So despite the high total, I think there are volume concerns for both offenses here.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, who do you like on the Ravens side?
Quarterback Lamar Jackson, he's been running the ball like crazy, destroying teams with the read option from the edge. So if you think the Hawks focus on him, try to take his outside runs away, I think Mark Ingram gets enough opportunities up the middle to be a viable player here. But if you think the opposite is true, say you think they want to take the inside run away and play the Ravens just like the past 3 teams have played them, then Lamar Jackson obviously has a high ceiling with his rushing upside. Nice. And tight end Mark Andrews, Mandrews as we call him,
Mandrews,
he's a top play for me. And I don't think anyone, especially with Marquise Brown being game time decision, looking very doubtful, I don't think anyone else from this passing game is worth playing in this matchup.
For sure.
What do you think about the Seahawks side?
Oh, man, this is just as murky as the other side of the ball. So you got wide receiver Tyler Lockett, projects to be shadowed by projects to be shadowed by Ravens cornerback Marlon Humphrey. Okay. And while I'm not afraid of this matchup, there are always volume concerns with the Hawks' ground and pound offensive philosophy, as we talked about.
Yeah.
So before I jump the gun again, one of the best matchups for wide receivers is outside wide receivers versus the Ravens, but they just traded for cornerback Marcus Peters from the Rams. Yep. Head coach John Harbaugh said he's going to play, and I think you can reasonably conclude he'll be matched up on wide receiver DK Metcalf, a guy who's been losing snaps for the past few weeks.
Yeah.
You also got Jaron Brown and David Moore rounding out this gross 3-man committee behind Lockett. Jaron Brown had 2 TDs last week. I'm not chasing that production. I don't want any part of these 3 outside of some DFS tournament throws.
Yeah, for sure. And the reason we don't want to chase those targets for those of you listening. So Jaron Brown really he had 3 targets last week that went for 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's 2 touchdowns is not sustainable on 3 targets a game. So so you want to focus more on volume plays rather than this guy had 5 touchdowns last week. Surely he can do it again. Well, no, if you look at the context behind it, he doesn't have the volume to consistently put up 2 touchdowns every week.
That's right. Volume is king, but context is the emperor.
That's right. Okay. So, and speaking of volume, Russell Wilson, you want to talk on Russell Wilson's volume a little bit?
Yeah. So if you're worried about volume, then Russell Wilson's your guy. He only throws about 20 to 25 times per game. This is going back 3 years now with this new grounded pound offensive system they have.
Yeah.
But that's been enough volume for him to be a consistent fantasy scorer because he always gets these multiple TD games.
Yeah.
And then I think Chris Carson's a pure volume play. He's averaging about 28 touches a game over the last 3 weeks. Yeah. And then wrapping up this game, I think both defenses are in play if you think this game hits the under, but I don't think I'm going to get there.
Nah, same here. I don't know that it hits the under, but I think both offenses can move the ball well enough. There probably won't be a lot of turnovers. Probably won't be a lot of defensive scoring going on here. So
Right. And you just cue up that Kermit the Frog, but that's none of my business. Drinking tea, maybe.
That's right. All right, moving on here. We got the Saints at the Bears. This game has a huge point total at 37.
Oh, man.
And the Bears are favored by 4 at home.
Oh.
What you got on this one, Ben?
So we got some more injuries. So
Nice.
big news here.
Yeah.
Saints running back Alvin Kamara is out.
Yes.
He has a high ankle sprain. It really affected him last week in Jacksonville. Those of you that started him, you know our pain.
Yep.
And then you got tight end Jaron Cook and wide receiver Trey Smith are also out. So the Saints offense is pretty beat up.
Yeah.
And then the Bears look pretty healthy. So speaking of the Bears, Mitch Trubisky is back, but he's looked bad this year.
Yes.
That's a combination of terrible and bad, in case you were keeping score at home.
Terrible, horrendous.
Yeah, horrendous. He's horrendous. Yeah, so play him at your own risk. I mean, if you're desperate for a quarterback, he's worth streaming. If you got nobody else, temper expectations here. The Saints defense been playing real well.
Yeah, for sure.
So, do you like anybody on the Bears' offensive side of the ball?
So
exactly that.
Yeah. So A-Rob, he should see Latimer the vast majority of this game. So I don't really love him this week. He has been getting a huge volume share, target share, but it's hard to play a guy against Marshawn Lattimore. He's been shutting guys down. So wide receiver Anthony Miller has probably the best matchup in the slot, especially since PJ Williams, who is their typical slot corner, who typically gets roasted, he is suspended this game, and although he's really bad, I think this might be an upgrade for the Saints.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah, you got a 3-year sample of him being terrible in the slot there. It's oof.
Yeah.
This might actually help the Saints defense out. You're right.
Right. So, I think Anthony Miller's he's an okay play. But yeah, it's just tough to trust anybody against what's been a really good defense in the Saints. Outside of that, though, flipping over to the other side of the field, who you like from New Orleans?
Well, this Bears defense is pretty stout, as you know, but they give it up the most to outside wide receivers. Mike Thomas is a guy you're always going to play. He gets heavy target volume. Yep. But if our boy, old Teddy Check down there can force the issue downfield, I think Ted Ginn's also playable because who else you got?
Yeah.
And then the tight end, who's the backup for Jared Cook, is a guy named Josh Hill. If you're desperate for a streamer, he's your guy.
Yeah. This is not the Josh Hill that typically plays quarterback, though, is it?
No, that's it. What's his name? Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill. Oh, okay.
Taysom Hill's the quarterback. Josh Hill is the tight end, I think. It's another Hill.
Yeah, we just need to get rid of one of those hills. One of them's got to go.
There's too many hills to die on here.
Yeah, you gotta change your name.
Exactly.
All right. What else you got on this one?
And then the Bears' offensive line's a mess. They just lost right guard Kyle Long to injured reserve. I think this makes the Saints' defense a good play in fantasy.
Yeah.
And with Kamara missing some time here, I think Latavius Murray steps into a good spot as the Saints running back one. But the matchup's not the greatest, but this is a Bears team that just got roasted by Josh Jacobs 2 weeks ago before their bye.
Yeah.
And then wrapping this all up, the Bears defense is always in play because they have such a great upside. So this is going to be a low-scoring poop show, I believe.
Nice. Got to keep it PG for the listeners at home, right?
Yeah, almost dropped the S word.
Nice. All right. Moving on here, we have the Eagles at the Cowboys up next. This game has a 49-point total, and the Cowboys are favored by 2.5 points. This game is on Sunday Night Football.
And believe it or not, we have more injuries, folks.
Just don't more. Say.
Yeah, shut the front door. So the Cowboys are beat up on both sides of the ball, but it looks like everyone who's beat up for them is going to play. On the Eagles side, you got wide receiver Deshaun Jackson is going to miss his fourth straight game.
Yeah.
Left tackle Jason Peters is going to miss his third straight game. cornerback Avante Maddox, and defensive tackle Tim Jernigan are also out.
Yeah.
So I think this game boils down to a big case of who's on first. So the Eagles secondary is garbage, but the Cowboys could be missing some players, even though it seems like they'll play. The Eagles have been very inconsistent offense, but the Cowboys' defense has been very inconsistent. So who's on first?
Yeah.
So I think as far as who's to play, I think on the Philly side, all the usual passing game suspects of Wentz, Ertz, Alshon, those guys are playable. So what do you think about this Cowboys offense?
Yeah, so I'm probably not playing Zeke because the Eagles front has been really, 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 really good against the run.
Plus, he looks like an Ewok.
Yeah, exactly.
Nub. Yeah.
If you're at home, go Google Ezekiel Elliott Ewok and go to Google Images and just scroll through there. That
you won't stop laughing for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think when Bam was the one that showed it to me, and oh man, I laughed for about 10 or 15 minutes straight. But so I'm not playing Zeke here. The volume will be there, obviously, but he's going to get 25 carries for 17 yards. Great. It doesn't mean no good in fantasy.
Yeah.
But obviously, the Eagles defense, pass defense, has been horrendous. So I think you can play whichever wide receiver from the Cowboys you want to play, and I think they're going to perform well. Dak Prescott obviously is in play. He's still trying to earn a paycheck, so fire those guys up. What do you think about the Eagles running back situation, though?
Yuck. So Jordan Howard gets most of the run, but he's a plotter type, so his upside is limited unless he scores multiple TDs.
Yeah.
And then Miles Sanders isn't getting enough touches, but he's always a big play or two away from providing some decent fantasy production. We saw him catch a long pass last week against the Eagles.
Yeah.
So to put a nice little bow on this whole game, I think we should get to both passing games, just depending on who plays the Cowboys and who plays the Eagles. Yeah. Don't want any of the running games, and both defenses are meh.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Last game on the slate is Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football, as the late, great Frank Gifford used to say.
That's right. It's the Patriots at the Jets. This game has a 44-point total, and the Patriots are favored by 10. I'm guessing we got more injuries in this one.
We do, in fact. So, last game, though.
Yeah.
So, Pat's wide receiver Josh Gordon is looking doubtful, and because Adam Gase is kind of a scumbag, he's been doing this for years, almost the entire Jets roster is on the injury report. So I have no idea who's going to play here for them. No idea.
Yeah.
There's no way of knowing.
No, there's not, because just like you mentioned, he's always done this. He lists if somebody has a hangnail, Adam Gase lists them on the injury report. So
yeah, God, it's annoying.
Yeah.
So since I'm annoyed, go ahead and chat me up about your pal Sam Darnold there.
Yeah, Sam Darnold. He's one of my favorite young players. He's got just enough confidence without coming off cocky, right? He talks a good game, and he's a pretty good quarterback as well. We saw the Jets offense when he came back from mono last week. Quit smooching on those questionable women, and got back in the game. The Jets offense really took a step forward with his return. He breathed some life back into this offense, if you will. Of course, the matchup's not ideal, but if you have either Robbie, Crowder, you probably have some guys on bye, right? You could do a lot worse, I think, than having one of these guys.
For sure.
And then, of course, my guy, Lev Bell.
Your boy.
He's a purely a volume play here. It's a tough matchup, and you just have to hope for a busted assignment and leads to a busted play, or a big play or three.
Yeah, and on the other side of the ball, the Patriots – make sure you keep an eye on the injury report leading up to this game. As we already talked about, Gordon's looking doubtful. Dorsett looking like he's going to play. Jacoby Myers filled in nicely last week with those two out.
I spoke a little bit on this last week, but Sony Michel's usage has been downright maddening. To me, I'm a Sony Michel owner. I have a vested interest in him doing well.
It has you flummoxed.
Yeah. My final verdict on this game is just to kind of watch for this to be a low-scoring affair. Obviously, the Pats D is in play. They've been putting up running back one numbers so far this year. Bell is a strictly volume play, more so in a PPR league, obviously. And you can take a stab at any wide receiver from this game, but definitely make sure to temper your expectations. This is not a game to stack.
Nope. Take us home.
Let's go ahead and get out of here. This has been another Buy Low Fantasy Sports production brought to you on 1490 Newstalk 1077. I'm Mitch. He's Bam. We're out.
Bye.